Welcome to the Evening Review. My name is Jemima Beatrice, your host for this evening. Now, today we have in Parliament NUFO MP Joseph Kauandenge. He will talk to us about the processes in Parliament. Parliament has recently, or is increasingly coming under fire for the quality of debate in Parliament, for the slacking, as some analysts believe MPs are doing, and the violence that we've recently seen. So thank you for joining us, Honourable Kauandenge.
Thank you very much.
Now, Honourable Kauandenge, MPs have been criticized this week in particular, and analysts believe that you are sleeping on the job. Some of the bills are not going through on time, or they are not even debated. What do you make of this?
Well, for starters, I really tend to agree with the sentiments expressed by those various analysts, political analysts. But I think, in a nutshell, Namibians themselves should be blamed, or should blame themselves actually, for having given the SWAPO party two-thirds majority in the National Assembly. And I will quantify that, what I mean by that. Because when you have to pinpoint the problem, where is a problem with the lecture performance, lack of, it's really at the doorstep of the SWAPO party. Why am I saying that? Because the SWAPO party, having the two-thirds majority in the parliament, they are the ones that are dictating the agenda, the order paper. Through the office of the speaker, that's where they will dictate as to what is going to happen in this parliament today or or tomorrow. And unfortunately, the SWAPO party is so allergic, that's the right word, to views, how constructive that might be from the opposition benches. So you have a situation where a simple bill that comes to Parliament that is being scrutinized on the floor of Parliament, where the oppositions are really putting in our efforts to say this is not going to work because of A, B, C, D. You will have the SWAPO benches being told to toe the line and actually even oppose for the sake of opposing, not really with substantive argument on the parliament floor. So if the analysts and the people outside there see that parliament is really not doing its job, for me, the few years that I have been in parliament, I will put that blame at the doorstep of the SWAPO party.
Yes, I understand. Perhaps you have a point that because of the party's the ruling party's dominance, they are holding, they can hold the debates hostage. But we also do not see quality debate coming through. We also don't see opposition MPs. We see a handful of them. And these are also not very ahead. Also, you can count them on one hand, topics that they would really come out radically. But usually they are quiet on some issues. But should that not be an area where opposition parties should capitalize on raising awareness and pushing issues and agendas?
Well, it is a question that always goes back to the quality that as parties we bring to Parliament. Because it is not the person that showed the loudest at the SWAPO rally or at the DTA rally or at the NUFO rally, Luta Continua, the Maneki, the what. It's not really those people that you should bring to Parliament. You have, as a party, when you bring your people to Parliament, you must look as to whether they will be able really to digest. The problem that we are having in our current Parliament is that we have so many deadwoods in that Parliament. People that came through party ranks, and I mean all the parties that are represented in Parliament, I don't know whether there is no system of really looking as to who are we sending to Parliament. Because Parliament, unfortunately, you must be able to read.
Of course.
You must be able to critically analyze bills. Now, if you don't have that capacity, that's where you will have many of those that are salary collectors. Since 2020, they have been sitting in Parliament. You haven't even heard how senseful they can be in that Parliament. The only time when you hear them is when they are interjecting, when they are saying, sit down, you puppets, you kufuts, whatever. So, unfortunately, really, and to be honest, you will, as you have said, maybe have 10 or 15 that you can count on your hand that when this person stand up in Parliament, I must listen. he or she will have a substantive contribution to make. But the rest, they just came through their connections in their parties, family, money, whatever the case might be. But that is not how we should really bring the cream of the crop to parliament. We must be in a position as parties to put mechanism in place where we will make sure that whoever we bring to parliament are people of substance that can really contribute meaningfully to the debates on the parliament floor.
Now, in the absence of having people, if we look at our electoral system, it is not always possible to bring people, educated people, to parliament, especially with a party-less system. And one of the issues that was seriously criticized this week when Parliament came under fire was the lack of the research capacity and the obvious lack of quality of debates. Where do you think are the shortcomings? Is Parliament, the National Assembly, is it playing its role effectively in making sure that MPs, because at the end of the day, Parliament as an institution need to play a role in making sure that they create well-rounded, or at least to help improve the quality of debate in Parliament. Are they doing their part?
I don't think so, because the problem, I think it's our electoral system that we have in place as well. But to a larger extent, it's also the question of separation of powers. What we have currently in our parliament, we have a parliament that is dominated by the executive. The executive branch of government dictates actually what parliament should and should not do. The majority party backbenchers that are sitting in that parliament, and believe me, there are some faces in that parliament, young as they are from the SWAPO party, that could have really contribute meaningfully to the debates. But this is what happens. When they stand up and they really use their conscience and debate on issues, they are called in and told, you must do the line on this and this and this. So these people then go back into their shells, because for the majority party, you cannot be yourself, you must be to the line, a certain line. From the executive branch of government, the ministers are in parliament. They dictate the bills that comes to parliament, right? Now, from a mere backbencher or an opposition party, you will stand up and make your substantive contribution. But unfortunately, there is these notions that have developed within the SWAPO ranks that says anything that's come from the opposition, how good it is, must not be accepted. So how will Parliament then play its rightful place in our society to debate issues? Perhaps when we have a coalition government in that Parliament, that's, I believe, that's the only time when you will see fierce debates on the Parliament floor, because everybody will want to make sure that I must substantiate whatever I'm bringing on the Parliament floor for the other person to support me. But for the current time, when we have this 2/3 majority, everything is just, we go, we put it on the table on the Parliament floor, the opposition can make as much noise as they want to, they can contribute meaningfully. For instance, when this issue of the FEMA issue came up in Parliament,
Yes.
we have a system that is so corrupted to the core within our democratic order that we call is a democracy, where bills are brought into Parliament. Those few of us that can talk, stand up and talk and reason and bring substantive reasoning on the table to say this is not in the best interest of the Namibian people. But what happened thereafter? They will listen, they will go back to their caucuses, they will come back to Parliament as a majority party, they will say, Minister, you take this line, you take this line, the party, backbencher, you take this line, and it's a done deal. But when it backfire outside there, we all, including the opposition, are being blamed that we are sleeping on duty. But to some extent, we really are trying to do our level best within that Parliament. But the majority party will always have its own way of doing things.
Speaking about FEMA, I wanted to bring it up earlier. Would it be a fair observation that indeed parliamentarians, opposition in particular, was sleeping on duty when that bill came through Parliament. Not only the fact that it was discussed not extensively discussed in Parliament, but the fact that political parties failed to raise the alarm with the electorate outside Parliament.
Well, to substantiate that, one must also understand the process of lawmaking in Parliament. When a minister tables a bill in Parliament, that bill is not accompanied by regulations. They table the bill in Parliament, we debate the content and the scope of that bill, and the bill is passed. Once the bill is passed, the regulations is an afterthought after the bill has been passed. So they don't bring the regulation together with the bill in Parliament, and that's where the FEMA issue came in. And I believe that even yesterday, Honorable Elma Dienda, when we were discussing the issue of, in the committee stage of the, what was the bill yesterday? I forget the name of that bill. The access to information.
Yes, the access.
She raised that. Yes, she raised that objection to say, ministers, you are bringing bills into this Parliament. We debate the content and scope of the bills as you present them. But after the bill has been passed, the regulations are not in our hands. It's in the minister's hands to go and put regulations. So we want to see a situation where the minister must bring along with the bill those regulations, so that when we pass the bill, we cannot be caught off guard later on to say, but this regulation, where does it come from? But it comes from the same bill that you passed that have now become an act.
Yes. The other thing is, you have now put a lot of blame on the ruling party. And I know some of the smaller political parties may not have the money for researchers. How do you, as NUDO, as a party, how do you prepare yourself for Parliament processes in order to make sure you bring about quality dialogue?
Well, back to what I said, that when you bring MPs to that Parliament, a person first have to have the capacity to reason, to research on his own, and to speak. Because it doesn't help. You can have the best team of researchers around you. They will research and give you a piece of paper or contribution that you must make in Parliament. But if you don't have the capacity to digest what you have been given, and if you are not a good public speaker for that matter, because in order to make it as a parliamentarian, you must be a person that can really speak well. Make no mistake, because by the time you want to go to the next sentence, someone stand up with a point of order, and then by the time you come back to the speech, you have already lost what is it that you wanted to say. So yes, the research capacity of our Parliament leaves much to be desired. And this is where we raised hell when the national budget was approved, where we halt the National Assembly budget for some time before it was approved. Because why? The executive branch of government, they are making sure that they have all the resources. The ministers have their PAs, they have their research assistants, they have the legal drafters, what. But Parliament has been relegated for such a long time. An important institution that is a cornerstone of our democracy have been relegated for such a long time into the background. Why? Because the executive branch of government dominates the legislative branch of government, that is the Parliament, and they don't give much resources to Parliament to be able to capacitate Parliament with research assistance that the MPs can use for parties that might not really be able to afford their own research assistant. So this whole concept of separation of power, really, that's where we are always going back to say, if Parliament is to really live up to the expectations and aspirations of the Namibian people, to be a body that is empowered with the legislative powers of this country, then there should be separation of power. Parliament must be given enough resources. When we send parliamentarians to that house, we must not send those that shout the loudest at our rallies, those that are well connected with whoever, because of their surnames. We must send people that who have the integrity, the quality, and the capabilities to do justice to the lawmaking process.
Honorable, it's the second time that you've been saying that you've been talking about people that are connected, and that we should not parties should not send people that are well connected, people that are the loudest. You seem to be very frustrated. Can you please expand on this frustration?
Well, I have said we are what? 104 members in parliament. Since we came to parliament in 2020, there are MPs that I don't even know, me as a member of parliament, in that house, that when I see them even on the streets, I have to, because they know me very well, because I'm a noisemaker in parliament, when they come and greet, say, Honorable, you have to think deeply to say, who's this person? But that's a member of parliament, for God's sake. Now, the question arises as to why are at least 80% of our MPs not known? One. Two, why are they not contributing anything meaningfully in that parliament? And it's because of the system that we have, the party list system. Because when we go to electoral colleges, our various parties, do we really look at the qualities above everything else? You had a very interesting discussion last night with the former Prime Minister here.
Yes.
On the question of succession and the woman president. And he was really spot on to say, in a democracy like Namibia, we don't have to look to a person because she is a woman or he is a man. We have to look to the quality of that person, whether this person will be able to really contributing or meaningfully. And this disease is across everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's not only in parliament, even in local authorities. For God's sake, I was a city councillor for how many years? 5 years, gone. But when you are given that thick document, and you have been at the city council meetings, that yellow big book.
Council book, yes.
Yes. As a councillor, you have to read and understand and digest what the officials have put in that book. But if you cannot, then you will be sitting there at the city council and eating sweets for 5 years, and water, and snacks.
For 5 years. Honorable, it's a very insightful interview that we're having here. Let's go for a quick break, and then we come back and we expand on what you are saying right now.
Thank you.
Welcome back here to the Evening Review. We are in conversation with Honorable Joseph Kauandenge of the NUFO Party. He's a member of Parliament. We are talking about the quality of debate in Parliament and the lack. There's been criticism that there's a lack of quality debate in Parliament. Now, Honorable, before we went on a break, you said something about coalition. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I spoke about 4 years ago about plans. Mm-hmm. Or at the time, there were plans for political parties to go into a coalition. But at that very time, it failed because party leaders were not willing to stand down and allow others to lead them. Now, you just brought up the issue of coalition. Have you regained faith in the possibility of seeing a coalition movement in the opposition part of politics?
For me, it's the issue of coalition is noble, but for me, at this point in time, it's a far-fetched dream. Why? Because we have egotistical, selfish, narrow-minded political leaders in this country, unfortunately. And when I say political leader, I mean at the level of the presidency that are running, with the exception of maybe one or two. Mm-hmm. Why am I saying that? A practical example is what we are now having in Swakopmund. There is a by-election there. If the opposition leaders were really serious to really make a meaningful contribution and turn the tide against the ruling party, at least to have that balance of power in the administration of this country, we could have put our egotism, our illogical thinking and narrow-mindedness in a corner and came together and say, for the interest of the Namibian people, let's move forward. But now what is happening is that you will be surprised after the nomination how many political opposition parties will fill their candidates in Swakopmund.
In fact, they've already started.
Exactly. So if you take the votes of all these parties after the election and put them together and Swapo win, these parties, should they have put their differences aside, could have won that constituency. So we are still there. So, and now it's what, 2022, 2023, it's only 2 years to go before the next election. I don't believe there is a political maturity, political consciousness, and political determination from the party leaders to come together for the interest of Namibia. Everybody wants to be president. Maybe Kauandenge also wants to be president of NUFO one day. I don't know. So until such time that we put our differences aside and our own needs aside, there will not be a coalition of opposition in this country.
And from what we are seeing, can we? I mean, we've seen political parties walking out in unison in parliament for certain issues, but do you think in the next 5 years we could see them coming together?
Not in this election, but maybe after this election. But in this election that is coming now, I don't see that really happening because, as I have said, maybe power is too sweet for us, those that are in political parties, that we don't want to come together, because by the time when we decide to come together, then coalitions always fail at the first entry point, and that is who is going to be the leader.
So if we have this fractured opposition, political opposition sector, it leaves obviously a lot of room and space for the ruling party that is really cemented in the country to win again, with perhaps 2/3 majority. So what alternative do you then see?
Well, we will still talk. For NUTO as a party, we are open to a coalition with anybody that is really seeing the need for such a coalition. There is a discussion that has been started underground now for a few weeks. I just hope that we will not come at a stage where the question will come, who is going to be the leader? Just that question. And then the discussions are off the table and everybody goes back into his own little corner. But for us to save Namibia, for us to bequeath a lasting legacy for the future generation of this country, we as opposition leaders must put our differences aside. We must come together. If Kauandenge cannot be the leader of that coalition, he must accept that in the interest of our kids and future generation, I can take a second spot, fine, or I can go and do something else. But the problem with many of our leaders, even in the opposition, is that we don't also empower ourselves educationally wise, so that if the political side does not work, I can as well make a living somewhere else. That's also our problem. So our only basic income then is politics. So I must be there. I must make sure that I retain my party and my presidency for me to be able to get or to bring money at home.
And is that perhaps why we see people not saying, remaining quiet in parliament because they are there to protect their bellies?
Of course. No, definitely. We have many choir singers in parliament. They are, but there is no conductor of some of those choirs. They will make noise as much as they want. But when you ask him, but why are you making noise and interjecting? No, I'm towing the party line. What party lines are you towing? I'm talking about substantive issues that have bearings on the lives of Namibian people outside there. So we have many salary collectors in parliament, that's the truth. Many MPs in that parliament, they don't even understand the basics of how parliament or the parliamentary system should work like. They are just there for, I'm there for my belly, my pension, my medical aid, and I go home.
Thank you very much for joining us, Honorable. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in once again. Good night.